Hi, I'm Jamie Miller, a registered SQF consultant and food safety consultant at Kellerman Consulting, and you are watching our video series on allergen risks and controls in food facilities. In this episode, we are going to review the different controls that can be applied to allergens in the facility and how these controls can work together to assure all the risks associated with allergen contamination and mislabeling are reduced or removed. The first control is awareness of the locations of allergens at all times in the facility. The second control is developing careful procedures for how allergens are handled in the facility. And the third control is ensuring accurate label information for allergens is present each time they are used. When a facility is performing these tasks consistently and effectively, allergen management becomes routine and sustainable for operations, and the chances of allergen mistakes are greatly reduced. So let's start with a closer look at controlling the locations of allergens in a facility. Controlling the locations of allergens in the facility starts with the identification of allergens as they enter the facility. For planned shipments, clearly identifying the allergens at receiving is a best practice. When a facility receives any materials containing allergens, these should be marked with a sticker or signage clearly indicating that the product contains an allergen. Facilities may choose to apply a label that says the word allergen on it for all allergens that enter, or may incorporate a system for identifying each allergen. Specifying each allergen is the more desirable approach for safety and quality, but the simpler and general approach is also acceptable. If allergens are clearly identified as present on every incoming pallet or package, we then need to identify allergens in the facility that are not in the actual ingredients, such as those which may be present in employee meals and snacks. Once we have all of the allergens identified in operational ingredients, chemicals, and in employee meals, we need to schedule assessments of those allergens during the year. Allergen assessments for low-risk facilities may be performed yearly, but for medium and high-risk facilities, assessments should be quarterly or monthly. And in facilities that have repeated allergen violations, the risk level increases and weekly checks may be the most appropriate to help control the higher risk. Common sources of outside allergens are hand soaps and lotions, lubricants, processing aids, and employee meals. The way the facility handles employee meals is a special case for allergen control. Since the meals and snacks employees bring into the facility change on a daily basis and are generally uncontrolled, we cannot use identification in most cases. Instead, we need to treat employee meal areas and vending machines as containing all 9 major allergens and all potential types of food sensitivities, such as sulfates, nitrates, food coloring, and gluten. The only exception is if the facility has a stated policy of restricting certain types of food in the facility, as is often the case with peanuts and tree nuts. Creating separate eating areas or having vending machines does not need to cause disruption in the facility, since we control employee-introduced allergens through our hygiene program and through effective hand washing prior to returning to GMP areas. It is important, however, to make sure employees are not bringing meals and snacks out of the eating areas or leaving them in lockers or in GMP areas. So remember, it is okay to allow employees to bring meals and snacks of their choosing as long as it is compliant with the facility's food restriction policies, food is kept and eaten in designated areas, and good hygiene is observed following eating of food. Determining effective controls for allergens during operations is dependent on the nature of the allergen and how they are stored and how they are transported to the line and through operational equipment. The state of the allergens needs to be considered, as they may be in the form of dry powders, liquids, or dense solids. For dry powders with allergens, for example milk powder, actions like mixing creates airborne particles that move the allergens throughout the surrounding areas, and depending on the air control system, possibly into other GMP areas where non-allergenic products could become contaminated with that allergen. Liquid allergens may splatter if dropped from a high distance, and they may run and pool in areas around the facility. Another source of potential movement of the allergens throughout the facility would be if an employee steps in that liquid and walks into other areas, which would transport the allergenic material through the facility via the employee's shoes. Additionally, scoops, shovels, knives, and other utensils used to handle allergens must be controlled so that once they are used in operation, they are only used with like allergens or cleaned and sanitized prior to further usage. We will now look at how we can monitor allergen presence through scheduling and testing in our next episode. An aspect of operations requiring considerations for allergen control are line changeovers. By line changeover, we are talking about running one product to a stopping point or completion, removing that product from equipment used to process it, and then switching to a different product on the same equipment. When no allergens are involved in this process, or when moving from one product to the next with a like-to-like allergen, as happens with different types of bread, from whole milk to skim milk, or from different types of fish, line changeovers oftentimes will not require a full cleaning or sanitation. However, if we have a break or change in the allergen profile, we must have a documented intervention on all equipment and utensils used during that line change. That usually means removing soiled utensils and tools and replacing them with cleaned and sanitized utensils and tools prior to starting back up, and shall also include cleaning and sanitizing of food contact surfaces or food contact adjacent areas on all production equipment used as part of the changeover. For facilities that perform frequent small or medium-sized production runs with multiple allergens, line changeovers occur regularly and are complex, time-consuming, and are a frequent source of nonconformances. When line changeovers with allergens are regularly required, the facility should always consider this to be a medium to high risk for allergen contamination, regardless of the allergen controls implemented in the facility. With allergens properly identified in the facility and properly controlled through hygiene and line changeover procedures, the last area to cover is labels. Controlling allergens through labeling is a complex set of actions and requires the most continuous attention from employees during operations. Labels must be accurate for legal and safety reasons beyond the identification of allergens and should be checked for accuracy as part of the best practices. For facilities that assess themselves as medium or high risk for allergens, label checks are critical for the effective control of those allergens. This means careful controls for labels, whether labels are printed by an external provider or if they are printed in-house, as both of these options provide considerable risk. Whether labels are printed by an outside company or whether the facility prints them on site, all rolls or stacks of labels must be inspected when they are received or printed, and again when they are brought to the production line to make sure they are accurate and legible. Beyond checking at receiving and pre-operation, labels as part of allergen controls require checks during operations at scheduled frequencies. Kellerman Consulting recommends hourly label checks on the line as a default position for operations with medium risk for allergens, and more frequently where high risk for allergens are assessed in the facility. Now that we have covered the basics of allergen controls in a food facility, we need to turn our attention on how to verify that our controls work for lowering or eliminating allergen risks within the facility. In our next episode, we are going to look at how we monitor allergens in operations, as well as how to test or check for allergens in operations periodically to ensure our methods of control are effective. Thank you for watching. For more food safety training videos and resources, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or follow us on LinkedIn.